We're sisters, best friends, and authors on a mission to help you stoke your creative fire and live the life of your dreams. We believe that purpose fuels passion and that creativity is your secret weapon for mass construction. There's never been a better time to bless the world with your dream realized. You're listening to The Kate and Abbie Show.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Kate and Abbie Show. We're super stoked to see all of you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to talk about how to write dialogue that feels engaging and realistic. Huge request. Lots of writers are wondering this. We are constantly talking about dialogue and how to make it sound as realistic as possible. You don't want it to sound like, these characters would never really say that in real life. You want it to feel like you're just a fly on the wall listening to a real life conversation that you can just drop into and immerse yourself in. So that's what we're going to break down today is like, what is it that makes dialogue feel realistic? Why does some dialogue, whether it's in film or in a book, why does it feel like, this feels fake versus this is so engaging. I can't put it down. I can't stop watching. What's the difference? What makes it engaging? So we're going to talk about all of that today. But first,
we have to thank our sponsors, who are you guys. You're the ones who support this show and keep it going. And we love you guys so much. So if you get value out of this podcast, go to patreon.com/The Kate and Abbie Show and help us keep this show alive and free of interruptions. So let's get into it. I think the thing that you and I talk about the most when we're writing dialogue and editing our own dialogue is not slowing it down with a lot of description.
Yeah.
I think that's like the number one, like the golden rule of dialogue, which is so hard to gauge sometimes.
It is hard to gauge.
Because when you're writing, you see your story like a movie playing in your head, and you see the characters, with body language, they're gesticulating or they're moving around the room or something like that, and you want to capture all of this imagery.
Yeah.
And you want your reader to see this imagery, but you can't.
Yeah, at the same time, you can't.
There's a balance there. You can only capture so much.
Yeah.
You can only describe so much before you start compromising the flow of your dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Because when you are watching a film, it feels richer sometimes because you get to see all these little eye movements and gesticulations and, this person looking at that person, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And it feels like, why can't I do that in my book? Why can't I just say all of that? But at the same time, in films, most of it you don't notice.
Yeah.
A lot of it is glossed right over. When someone's in intense dialogue, you're not paying attention to, his eye twitched slightly, or that person across the room looked over at, that statue. You're not paying attention to all of that. You're engrossed in one thing because just your attention can't be divided in a bunch of places at one time.
Yeah, when you're reading, it's like you have tunnel vision on one thing at a time, one line at a time. So you can only really pay attention to this one thing being described,
right?
And that's where your focus immediately goes. Whereas with film, you could have a wide shot of a room with multiple things happening, and your focus can only be on one thing. So you're not going to see everything.
Right, exactly. So even though it feels like it's freer in film, I was thinking about this earlier, it's really not, because there's still going to be the main subject. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are basic rules of cinematography even. Yeah. All these shots are framed up so that even though if there's something happening in the background or something happening in the room, there's that one subject. What's the subject? Because our attention can't be divided in a bunch of places at once, and we can't absorb everything that's happening. So really, when you're writing dialogue and you're writing dialogue tags, the time to add description is when it is meaningful and it matters to what is happening. Because every time we pause, we literally break up what someone's saying to insert, he rolled his eyes, he glanced across the room at the woman who just walked in, stuff like that. If we do too much of that, the reader, and I've heard a lot of readers say this, like, I skim through dialogue. What they're talking about is they're skipping through these interruptions that are not meaningful and after a while, it can actually make your reader kind of annoyed with you and they no longer trust you as a storyteller, because it's like, why are you bringing my attention to that? Yeah. Why are you bringing my attention to that? Because every time, like you were just saying, in a book, you can only, you have tunnel vision on that one thing. So if we have, he paused to look at the woman who just walked into the room, we're thinking, ooh, maybe this is meaningful. Yeah. This is important.
Yes, exactly.
Now, if it pans out to be nothing at all and this repeats, we're going to be like, why are you telling me this? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's a rule of neuroscience. Yes. I talk about this on my channel in my video called "Why Your First Chapter Sucks." I talk about how
that's such a good video.
The human brain is processing millions. I think it's like 11 million bits of information all the time. And only a few of those, like 40, are allowed to get into your actual conscious mind. So all these other things you're completely unaware of. And those few things that get into your conscious mind, that get served up in front of your conscious mind, are important to you. Yeah. So the same goes for when you're reading a book. If you are reading a line in a book that you are fully concentrated on, it's served up in front of your conscious mind, and it doesn't matter, it's almost like your brain short circuits. And it's like, right. Why am I reading this thing that does not matter? And you start to not care, and you start to care less and less and less, because you're having this unreliable relationship with the narrator, exactly, who is making you believe that these things are important when they're not.
Right. And it also totally derails the main thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It totally derails the main thought. If you're on an important thing, especially with emotional dialogue, like a lot of you guys are writing like romance and stuff. Maybe it's like a heated argument happening between two lovers or something. And then we're going to pause mid-sentence to be like, she looked out the window as the sunlight came in. It was a, cloudless sky beyond the window. Birds were chirping. The breeze was blowing. Like, okay, now I'm transported to a completely different place. I'm taken away from the intensity of that moment. Right. You know what I mean? So be very selective. Mm-hmm. And ask yourself, why does it matter? Don't make yourself an unreliable narrator. Yes. Like this also happens in film. This happens in film too. Like I remember us talking about certain points in like Howard's End. Also, I always remember this iconic scene in Narnia, and maybe someone maybe has a hidden meaning that I'm just not seeing. But like literally, Lucy finds the wardrobe, walks into the room. She's walking up to the wardrobe. This is the most pivotal moment. This is an inciting incident. Lucy is about to find Narnia, and she stops and looks over at the window where there is a fly tapping on the window trying to like get out. And she looks at it for a minute and then proceeds, and the music picks back up and everything continues. And I'm always like, why do they pause? Because it's tortured my brain to not know.
Maybe
why
it's like a deep spiritual meaning. Like,
why does it matter?
This just occurred to me. Maybe it's a deep spiritual meaning of like the little things in life distracting you or trying to distract you from finding greater enlightenment.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I don't know if that's what the director
that's what I mean.
meant.
Like, we've had conversations about why she pauses there.
Yeah, I don't
know.
That's just a theory.
So, and
you can comment below and tell us your theory about the fly.
Tell us your theory, because I would love to know. I've puzzled this out.
Yeah.
But there's also other things, like I don't know how many of you have seen Howard's End. It's a little more, I don't think many people have seen that. We watch a lot of British television, but
the new version is our favorite, by the way.
The new version. It's excellent.
Is it BBC or is it Stars?
I think it was BBC in partnership with Stars or something like that. But excellent. Talk about great dialogue. Excellent dialogue. But there were some moments in that film where it will like bring your attention to something that's completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
And it kind of tortures your mind as the viewer, because you're like, this must have meaning.
But it doesn't.
You're trying to figure it out, but it doesn't. Yeah. So there's lots of, and you're probably thinking of some yourself as we're talking about this. You're probably thinking, oh yeah, I saw a film once that was like that. I read a book that was like that. It was like, oh, get to the point. Why are you distracting me with this stuff? Because that's what it does. Is as the narrator, you have to understand you're bringing your reader on this journey, and you're pointing out, you're kind of like the safari guide, right? Yeah. You're like, look over there, there's an elephant. Look over there, there's a giraffe. You don't want to be like, whoa, look at that blade of grass, guys. Look at it closely. You know what I mean? Then you're eventually, the people you're taking on this tour are going to be like, why are they pointing these things out?
They're going to start not even looking. They're going to just start looking at their phones instead.
So that's the thing you have to remember is
Safari sucks.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want your Safari to suck. You want, as the tour guide, you are pointing out things that matter. And through the editing process of my second Sparrow book, that's coming out soon this spring, super excited about it. It's been quite the journey, but through the editing stage, and me and Abbie go through this all the time, is you're picking out like, is that distracting me from what's really happening here?
Yeah, or is it enhancing what's happening?
Or is it enhancing it?
Most of the
That's
time,
what it should do.
You can take things that are distracting and actually turn them around to be something that enhances the meaning of it, you know, and brings greater meaning to what's being said. Because every action, even not dialogue itself, but what's happening between dialogue should be communicative. It should be communicating to us what the characters are feeling, or maybe what they're not saying, or what their attitude is, or what their misbeliefs are in this moment. And all of those things like body language and things that we don't, the subtext, the things that we don't say, the expressions, and all of that can be used to communicate something, right? Even without dialogue itself. It's all part of dialogue, because we do most communication is nonverbal. Like, that's just kind of a rule of psychology. Yeah. And that's why psychologists train themselves to read body language and understand, you know, how can I grasp more? How can this person communicate to me more than just with their voice? And so your characters are doing that too. So find opportunities for your characters to communicate non-verbally, and let that be the in-between stuff, you know, the besides dialogue. But again, pay attention to make sure that it's not too much, because you can overwhelm the reader with too much body
and it
language
waters
too.
down the meaning of it, right? So if someone rolls their eyes all the time, then when there's really something obnoxious for them to roll their eyes at, it's like, well, I don't even really understand the extent of how annoyed they are, because they roll their eyes at everything.
Exactly.
Or multiple characters roll their eyes at a lot of things. So in order for it to have the impact you want it to have, you have to use it sparingly.
Exactly.
You know? So figure out, would they really have that big of a reaction?
Yeah.
What does that communicate how they're feeling, and not overwhelm the reader with, okay, there's too much face expression going on. Every other paragraph there's a face expression going on. Stuff like that.
Right. Exactly. Another thing that I think a lot of writers make the mistake of doing is info dumping in dialogue. So this is more of a world building thing, or just establishing the rules of the world or magic system or whatever you have going on, or even if it's not fantasy, even if it's taking place in the real world, explanations that like are unnecessarily drawn out, and just so much information. I feel like a lot of writers think, oh, I can just communicate that through dialogue, or there can be, you know, a mentor guide who appears and explains everything, and we have page after page after page of this explanation that we probably didn't even ask for. And that can be, again, distracting from the real meaning, the real depth of emotion.
And a lot of times, if you are to the point where you need someone to show up and explain everything in dialogue so that the reader understands, there's other issues going on that you actually need to address in a better way. Like, how can I communicate what's happening here? How can I simplify it?
Right. Or how can we sprinkle in a little bit of exposition in dialogue, not a big info dump, but here and there, what we need to know right now. Like, that's something that I'm dealing with right now as we work on our series. And we're kind of at a point where we're exploring a new world, so to speak. The main characters are embarking on a new adventure in a new world. They have a lot to learn about this world. And I've been making tons of notes, as you know, tons of outlines and guides to this world and how it works, and lots of world building, more world building than I've ever done in any other project before. But I'm trying to pace myself with explaining it in the story itself, and make sure that I'm not hitting the brakes to explain everything because I think it's really cool and I think the reader should know it, but it's not really relevant to the characters immediately.
Right.
You know, and of course this goes into world building, but specifically with dialogue, I think dialogue can be a useful tool for explaining how something's working or the, you know, exposition of a world, but it has to be done tactfully and sparingly and in reply or in answer to a question, which we were talking about in last week's episode a little bit. Asking questions and then getting the answers. Your character, you as the character, as the main character, should be asking these questions. And as the character gets curious, they start to find the answers, but not all at once.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a delicate balance.
It is. It is for sure a balance because you don't, like you were saying, you don't want it to just be this huge dump of information.
Yeah.
Especially sometimes it's also information that the reader already knows. And it's just, oh, well, this character needs to be filled in now.
Yeah.
And so now this character is going to tell them everything. And that's when skimming happens.
Right.
So you want to be very careful, very mindful about how you use that.
Yeah.
And spacing it out, skipping over things you know your reader already knows, paraphrasing things, etc.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing that I think a lot of writers do is conflict dumps in dialogue. And by conflict dumps, I mean your characters just kind of coming right out and saying exactly what they're dealing with in such an objective third-person omniscient sort of way that it almost sounds like they're reading a Wikipedia page about themselves.
Yes, that's such a good way to say that.
This is something that...
Dude, you did a video about that, didn't you? Because I remember using that example, and I know you're thinking of it, that one from that movie. I can't even remember what it was called, but the main character, one of the main characters.
Perfect Date?
Yes.
Yeah.
The girl is just kind of like, well, you know, my whole problem is that I'm insecure and I just stomp around my black boots hoping that, you know, I can act tough because really I'm just tender-hearted and hurt on the inside.
Yeah,
it's like
wait a
most
minute.
people need to go to therapy for years to have someone even help them sift through, like, what do I even feel?
Yeah.
So for this character who has up until now acted very kind of shut off and conflicted, and then suddenly they're like, you know what? I know what my whole problem is. And here it is. I'm going to explain it like, you know.
Yeah, which...
Like, it feels disembodied. You're right. It feels like they're an external source, like reading an article about themselves.
They're the author's voice coming through.
Right, exactly.
The author basically copying and pasting their character profile into the story to make the reader care.
Think about, like, okay, every single one of you listening right now and watching right now you have your own internal conflict, right? You probably wouldn't just come right out, and you might not even be able to articulate to yourself what it is.
Yeah, you might not even know what it is.
You might not even know what it is.
A lot of the characters you write don't know what their internal conflict is.
Right. So to put it in such black and white, simplified terms and like just kind of spit it out as this very tidy soundbite is what makes it feel unrealistic. That feels like unrealistic that character would even say that. You know what I mean? Because it kind of makes it like this little hallmark type of phrase. And it's like, what? I don't think they would say that. You know what I mean? That's what those little things can make it feel unrealistic.
Yes, 100%. And there are other ways to show us the character's internal conflict. There's so many other ways to do that. And you can sprinkle hints through dialogue. But with this, subtext is the key. And subtext is basically the easiest way to understand it is the stuff we don't say, but we are thinking. The thing behind the thing.
Right.
What am I saying? But what do I really mean when I'm saying that?
And you can show that through so many different things rather than the character just coming out and saying it.
Yeah.
Especially when it's a quieter character. Like if you're writing this about someone who's more introverted and then suddenly it seems totally out of character for them to just blurt out how they feel.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that makes your characters feel inconsistent. So find alternate ways to reveal the internal conflict rather than, okay, one of these characters is going to have to explain through dialogue what they're thinking.
Exactly. Because people don't communicate like that. I mean, how often do you have conversations where you are saying something that you're not just letting your stream of consciousness come out your mouth, you're talking, you're verbalizing your thoughts based on who you're talking to and what outcome you want for this conversation.
Right.
And not to say that you're being dishonest in a conversation, obviously not, but we alter the way we speak to various people that we meet throughout our day based on our relationships with them, what we want the outcome of the conversation to be, what we maybe hold back. We don't just say everything that we feel. So your characters shouldn't always say what they feel, and they shouldn't always feel what they say.
Right, because exactly, because you're right. It's like it's just every relationship is different. You're not going to talk to someone you bump into and you haven't seen them in a long time the same way you would talk to like a spouse or a significant other or your mother. You just wouldn't talk to them in the same way. So when you like have a character just kind of just their stream of consciousness to whoever's there, that's what it's like.
Yeah, that's where the dialogue feels really flat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of writers have asked me, how do you make your dialogue more realistic, more colorful, or funny, or interesting? And first of all, it has to reflect your character's personality and what they're going through, what they're internally struggling with. But it also has a huge element of this has to do with their relationships with who they're talking to. And that will vary, which makes it so much more interesting than if they just talk the same way to every single person.
Exactly.
Every single other character they encounter.
And there are so many series and books and book series that literally are fueled off of what characters aren't telling each other.
Yeah.
Okay. Downton Abbey. Case in point, that entire series, extremely successful, basically runs off secrets, deceptions, and what characters aren't telling each other.
Yeah.
That's what fuels so much of the internal conflict that keeps you just, I have to watch 5 more minutes of the next episode. It's not because every character is just coming out and saying what their internal conflict is. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any internal conflict. A lot of times that deflates it.
Yeah. And I think we're especially good at subtext because we watch so much British television.
Yes.
Because just in general, British writing is excellent,
good.
but it also has a way more of a focus on subtext, I think.
Absolutely.
Like I see, just comparing like all of the British television I've seen versus American television. In American television, there is way less subtext and more of just kind of emotional outbursts of what the characters are feeling whenever they're feeling it.
Right.
And I don't know, I love the subtlety of not saying what I'm feeling, not saying what I'm thinking, holding something back, or
it just
keeping
makes it so much
secrets.
richer.
Yeah, it's just
so much richer.
It's more, it feels more realistic too, because that's how you communicate in real life.
Yeah, it is.
There are many things that you don't say because you know the consequences of saying them, whether it will, unintentionally hurt somebody, or you just don't want everyone to know what you're thinking. You don't want this particular opinion to be criticized. There's just like so many nuances of communication and expression that I think when you start to focus on those nuances, your dialogue will immediately become so much more rich.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you guys want, just case examples, just watch some of BBC Masterpiece. I mean, we were raised watching that. That's basically the majority of what we watch. And it's the majority of what we watch now for dramas and stuff like that. And like you were saying, the subtleties in so many of these brilliant British writers, that what they do with a screenplay, what they do with the literature we've read is phenomenal, because there is that subtext, there's that subtlety, and that's what you experience in real life. A lot of times when you're talking to a friend or a family member, you're reading face expression, you're reading like little things behind the thing that's actually being said. And so if you can incorporate that into your character's internal conflict and the dialogue that's being written, it's going to make it that much more rich.
Yes, 100%. I agree. And that's the fun I find that to be super fun when you are sort of balancing the conflict of what's being said and what's being felt. And even, especially from a first-person narration perspective, it's so fun to play with that dance of what is the character thinking and feeling versus what are they saying, and how are they interpreting the other characters. And even if those things totally contradict each other, a conversation becomes way more interesting when you are expressing, you're talking to this other character, one character is talking to another character, and you can see that inside they're thinking something completely opposite, even if they're not lying, but they are just dealing with this battle, this conflict of emotion versus what I know I should communicate.
Right.
It becomes so much more engaging that way.
It does.
So yeah, hopefully you got some value out of this discussion. Hopefully you took some notes. Real quick, let's recap. Less description makes dialogue flow better. That's like the golden rule, number one rule of dialogue. Make sure every action matters. If you're breaking up your dialogue, pausing to show us some description of something, make sure it matters and tells us something important. Don't info dump in dialogue. Only tell us the current need to know information that matters to the characters right now. And don't conflict dump in dialogue, because subtext is the key and characters don't always feel what they say or say what they feel. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening today. We would love to hear your thoughts on this topic, so join the discussion and comment below this video. If you're not on YouTube, you can find the video version of this podcast on Kate's channel, which is youtube.com/KAMins. You can also find a bunch of awesome writing videos on my channel, which is youtube.com/AbbieAmmons. We love you guys so much. Thank you again to our amazing patrons who support this show. If you get value out of this podcast, go to patreon.com/The Kate and Abbie Show and help us keep this podcast alive and free of interruptions. Until next week,
Stay stoked.
and rock on.